How does our brain manage to transition from a limited function at birth to a complex abstract thought in a relatively short period of time? Hello, I'm a developmental psychologist, and today we're talking about Piaget's cognitive theory. Piaget's cognitive theory consists of 4 stages. Number 1, sensory motor stage. This stage lasts from birth until the age of 2. The name really speaks for itself. The infant discovers the world through sensory perception and motion. Describing this stage, Piaget believed that intellectual development is similar to a biological process of adaptation. Imagine the baby is born into this world and they need to survive. How do they do it? They have to adapt. But how? Through assimilation and accommodation. Let's take an example of mother going for a walk with her baby. The baby sees a dog and points at the dog and says, "Meow," because yesterday when they went for a walk, they saw a cat. The baby sees the dog as an animal with 4 legs, a head and a tail. The only reference the baby has in their mind is a cat. This is called assimilation. When the baby responds to a new event in a way that is consistent to his existing mental schema. Now the mother explains to the baby, "No, this is a dog." The cat says meow, but the dog says woof woof. Now accommodation takes place in the baby's mind. When he needs to accommodate his mental schema about a 4-legged animal to allow for a new object. Another significant process that takes place at this stage of development is the understanding of object permanence. At about 3 months of age, infants begin to recognize objects. But if they're removed from their field of view, poof, the object ceases to exist. Object permanence begins to develop between 4 to 6 months of age. This is why the game of peekaboo is so exciting to babies. You cover your face. The baby's gaze is fixed on you. There is tension in the air. Then you uncover your face and give a tiny jump scare, peekaboo. The previous tension and the jump scare are too much for the baby. There must be an emotional release. Will it be laughing or crying? Well, you are back in the land of the living. So the baby begins to laugh. And they want you to do it over and over again. Why? Because through repetition, our neural pathways become deeper and stronger. The infant begins to understand. Just because you obscure the object does not cease to exist. By months 9 to 12, the baby will both initiate and play peekaboo game with you. Even though this is a cognitive theory, I would like to mention that this stage is vital for the development of a healthy attachment to primary caregiver. I talk about attachment theory in a different video. Number 2, pre-operational stage. Now, object permanence is somewhat of an abstract thought. You do not see the object, but it still continues to exist. In this stage, abstract thinking continues to develop, and the child is able to think not only about space, but time as well. Things that happened in the past and things we're going to do in the future. Language acquisition, memory, and imagination also develop. The child attributes life and consciousness to inanimate objects and readily engages in make-believe. The child relies on the caregiver to provide information about the world. That's why one of the most used words by 3-year-olds is why. Asking why helps them learn about the cause and effect relationship and satisfies their curiosity as they explore the world around them. It is important to note that the line between reality and fantasy is not established yet. And through reading fairy tales and children's books, the child looks to the parent for reassurance that the fairy tale creatures are staying in the books and do not exist in the real world. Even within this stage, we can see the jumps in the understanding of language nuances. For example, reading an Amelia Bedelia book where the main character takes figures of speech at face value and gets into all sorts of trouble can be absolutely hilarious for a 6-year-old, but terrifying for a 4-year-old because they do not understand that type of humor yet. So, these are a few things to mention that a child at the pre-operational stage is trying to figure out. Egocentrism. They have difficulty grasping that other people may have different thoughts, feelings, and viewpoints. When I say viewpoints, I mean actual viewpoints. If you put a doll at the other end of the room and ask a child what the doll sees, they struggle to understand that the doll has a different viewpoint. Centrism. They are only able to focus on one aspect in a situation, and as a result have errors in judgment. For example, if you are driving down the street and you see a ball fly out from between the parked cars, you need to come to a stop because a child will be running after the ball. The child is only able to focus on the ball in this situation. Relative to that is a class inclusion. If you show a child 10 red balls and 5 blue balls, and you ask them, what is more, the balls or the red balls? The child will say the red balls, because they cannot include into one class the red and blue balls. Irreversibility. Children in the pre-operational stage struggle to understand conservation of liquid, where pouring water from a wide glass into a tall and narrow glass does not increase the amount of water. Conservation of numbers. A child sees 5 toys next to each other and they count it and there are 5 of them, and then you spread the toys further apart and now the child thinks there are more toys because they take up more space. Transformation of objects. If you have a Play-Doh this big and you turned it into a pancake, the child will see that, oh, there is more Play-Doh now because the circumference is bigger. They have difficulty to understand transformation of objects. And reversing actions. If you play with a child a game where they copy you, first you clap your hands, then you stomp your feet, then you click your fingers. And now you tell them, let's do it the other way around. Click your fingers, stomp your feet, clap your hands. Physically, the child is able to repeat your movements, but they cannot make it happen because mentally they are not able to reverse the actions. Now we're moving to stage 3, concrete operational stage. Children at this stage have grasped conservation, disintegration, reversibility, seriation, classification, conservation of numbers. What milestones do they need to overcome at this stage? Concrete thinking. Children at this stage are capable at solving problems and thinking logically, but their thinking is still tied to concrete, tangible objects and experiences. They may struggle with abstract and hypothetical concepts. The last stage of children's cognitive development, according to Piaget, is the formal operational stage. It starts at the age of 12 and continues into adulthood. There is a real shift from concrete thinking to abstract. That's why algebra is not taught before the age of 12. It has abstract mathematical concepts that are impossible for children to grasp in the concrete operational stage. What are other examples of abstract thinking? Imagine giving a teenager a task to think about justice or how it applies in different situations. The next is hypothetical reasoning. So you have a teenager and you tell them, what if humans could fly without assistance? At this stage, they should be able to come up with implications, advantages, and potential drawbacks of this idea. Deductive reasoning. The example of deductive reasoning would be, all mammals have lungs. Whales are mammals. Your teenager should be able to deduce that whales have lungs, even though they have never directly observed the fact. Systematic and logical thinking continue to improve at this stage. Some of the elements of it are metacognition. What is metacognition? It is basically thinking about thinking. Say your teenager is studying for the test. Then they stop and decide to revise their methods of preparing for the test, whether they should be making cards for practice or reading through the chapters or spending their time in a more efficient way. That's metacognition. At this stage, scientific thinking develops. A child should be able to form a hypothesis, carefully develop an experiment, control variables, gather data, and draw conclusions based on the observed results. Sounds daunting? But that is what you see at the school science fairs. And finally, idealism and idealistic thinking. A teenager may believe in some good cause wholeheartedly, thinking that if everyone just have the same level of conviction, then we can move mountains. This idealism and energy are beautiful, but of course they are slightly blindsided by the fact that just because something is good and a right thing to do, not everyone is going to jump on the wagon. Because people have a freedom of choice. Idealism is a milestone that needs to be balanced with realism. The ability to anticipate challenges and setbacks, an understanding of different perspectives, and the ability to adapt their strategies. And this is Piaget's cognitive theory. If you would like to see the challenges and critiques of Piaget's cognitive theory, watch my next video.